Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Financial Survival Network is presented to you by Regal Assets. Buy and sell physical gold and silver through your existing retirement plan, 100% tax-free with Regal Assets. If you want to include physical gold or silver in your existing IRA or old 401k, request your free investment kit, which was recently featured in the Forbes and Smart Money Wall Street Journal magazines. Call toll-free 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620, or visit regalassets.com. You're listening to part 2 of the interview.
And I started getting more and more people, and now I have somebody who just books people for me and does all the post-production. And all I do is write material and interview, and it's this evolution, like you said. You start with this crummy equipment, and then it takes hold of you, and you realize, I think just like you said, this is what I was born to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I am better at than any other thing I've ever done, and this is what I will die doing, or maybe not die doing, but that I'm going to do for a long period of time that really adds meaning and really, really just makes life so much better when you're doing something that you're passionate about.
I think I'm probably going to die doing it. They'll have to pry my cold, dead hands from my microphone. But, well, absolutely. And that's a story that resonates so well with me because obviously it's similar to my story in a lot of respects. And I hope it will resonate with some of the listeners out there because I guarantee there's at least one person out there listening to us right now who thinks, oh, I don't know if I have it in me. I don't know if I'd be any good at it. And, hey, maybe the first time you try it, you wouldn't be. But the 10th time or the 50th time or the 100th time you try it, you'll be better. And that's really the secret to all of this. There's no secret at all. It's just perseverance and hard work. So my hat's off to you for persisting and keeping expanding because I think your work that you're doing is so valuable. And I know that you're working on some other things behind the scenes, books, etc., that we'll tell people about after this break. If there's anyone out there who would like to get in on the conversation, ask a question of Kerry or make a comment, 1-800-313-9443. That's 1-800-313-9443 will get you up and on the air. So let's take a short break. We'll be right back, once again talking to Kerry Lutz of the Financial Survival Network right after these messages. All right, friends, welcome back to the program. Once again, James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. And once again tonight, we are talking to Kerry Lutz of the Financial Survival Network.com. And I hope you will go there to check out the work that Kerry is doing. And as I mentioned before the break, he's working on a number of things, including moving to Florida for the winter, which would be a nice place to broadcast from, I'm sure. And he's also working on a book. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Kerry?
Sure. Well, honestly, I've been a resident of the People's Republic of New York for so many years now. And, I guess I could take paying the taxes and all the collectivist nonsense that you go through living here. And I mean, it's getting to be a Stalinist theme park with the Big Gulp Band, all these bands that Bloomberg is engaging in that I'm just sick of. But I don't live in Manhattan, fortunately. But, I just am tired of the cold winters, and I just need a change of climate. So that's what it's really about.
And how about the book?
Well, the book, it's evolved quite a bit over the past year that I've been writing it. But basically the title is Forget Wall Street, Go for the Gold. And in it, we really do a thorough analysis of central banking, of the historic roles of gold and silver underlying ancient money up until very recent times, arguably until 1971, but really up to the 30s is really when we had metallic-based money. And then we traced the history of paper money, which started in China, and Marco Polo was there, and he was amazed. He thought it was the most brilliant invention he had ever seen, that you could just create wealth with a printing press. And then he witnessed hyperinflation, and the Chinese called it flying money, because no sooner would you get it in your hand than it would fly out, and when you had to buy something. And, the history of paper money is just replete with examples of hyperinflations and monetary abuse by the government through legal tender laws. And then we get finally to current times, where we're going through what arguably is the death of fiat money in the world, whether it's in the U.S., China, or Japan, or Australia, or Canada, the euro, take your pick. It all seems to be dying a very inglorious death. And what's going to be left in the end is some system that is somehow connected to gold and silver. Probably gold, but I don't really see any alternative. So that's why you need to stop thinking about paper and really go for the gold, which is what I called it. But like I said, that doesn't mean that you can just drop out of the system tomorrow. And assuming that these mining companies will still exist after the new monetary regime comes in, they'll probably be more valuable than ever.
Well, it raises some interesting points there. For example, what's your take on the modern greenbacker movement and the idea that if we could just get government control over the printing press instead of Federal Reserve control, then we could use this system for our benefit and we could use it wisely and guard over it. What's your take on that idea in general?
Yeah, that's that Ellen Brown thing where we just print it directly. We don't sell it we don't have the central bank, we don't give a bond to the central bank, then the central bank writes a check, and then the debt gets sold off to banks, and they earn interest. And, it's nice theoretically because 70% of the U.S. debt is interest, which means we're effectively paying interest on interest, which is not a long-term strategy for success, let's face it. When you pay interest on interest, it means you can't even afford to pay the interest back, so you're paying interest on that. But, the fact is that virtually all government debt is bad. It all gets defaulted upon, and it doesn't matter who prints it up or who issues it. It's going to go bad at some point in the future, and we're just going to have to relearn that lesson. The key is don't allow government to go into debt except in the most extreme, dire emergencies. Outlaw debt. And Martin Armstrong, who's a frequent guest on the show, who's a worldwide leading monetary authority, has done a 1,000-page book on the history of government debt. And finally, it could have gone on for a few thousand more pages, but the publisher said, we're not printing a 5,000-page book on this. So he had to cut it to 1,000 pages. But the pattern is just incredible, James. You just see it again and again. An area becomes affluent, becomes wealthy. The government starts giving out goodies so they can increase their power. They give out more and more. They borrow and borrow and borrow. Then their credit goes bad. Then they default. And then they decline. And this is dozens of times back to the city-states of the Middle Ages. It just keeps happening and happening. So, it's not the money that's the problem. It's the debt that is the hallmark that governments are allowed to issue to back up their promises that otherwise they would never be able to keep, and they would be banished for making.
Well, I'm very much in line with that. I think anything would be better than our current debt-based system, so I'd rather see something like that direct issue of money, but I still don't believe that that could ever be controlled properly or that it would ever not devolve into hyperinflationary printing. So that's an option that's off the table for me. But on the other side, with the gold standard, I see the value of gold as a store of value, but as a medium of exchange, I find it to be highly problematic. And I think we have to start thinking of more creative ways to separate that. So what's your take on things like Bitcoin and other ideas for different forms of transferring money around the globe instantaneously without government tracking?
I mean, I love that concept of Bitcoin, and I think competing currencies and allow the government's currency, if they insist upon having one, to be subject to the vigors of competition. You know, Bitcoin, I've talked with people about it. I know it's open source. Theoretically, it's impossible to create more. But, you know, we've got the best hackers in the world working for the NSA. I don't know what can stop them from any algorithm and creating money out of thin air. You know, I just am nervous about it. But if some people want to take seashells or other people want to take green stamps, if you remember them from when we were kids, where you used to go buy groceries or cigarettes or whatever, and they'd give you stamps, and then you could collect the stamps and redeem them. Whatever people are willing to accept as money is acceptable. And then nowadays with technology, this can happen on a massive scale, just like gold money, James Turk's outfit. You know, they've got several $billion in precious metals they're holding that you can instantly convert to any currency in the world and buy something with. And you've even got Peter Schiff, who's got a bank an offshore bank in the Grenadines, I think, who's stocking up on gold, and then you get a debit card and you have an account with X number of grams, and as you charge stuff, your account gets deducted the equivalent value of whatever currency you're using, and then you can put more gold in. And, you know, if dollars are so wonderful, if euros are so wonderful, if yuan and yen are so great, then what are they afraid of competition? Let the people choose what type of money they want to use. I mean, that's the way it worked in the United States for an awful long time.
That's exactly right. Whenever you have the monopolization of something so vital as the monetary system itself, you know that there's got to be a manipulation at play and centralization that only works in the hands of a very few. So again, I agree. There needs to be competition, and people need to be free to be able to exchange what they want to exchange in the way they want to exchange it. And that's the type of free market that we're talking about, not the crony capitalist free market that people are talking about. Well, there are so many different ways in which the numbers can be manipulated and markets can be cornered and manipulations can happen in all sorts of different ways. And we know that there is some basis to all of this underlying the system. What are some of the most egregious things that you've come across in your years at looking at this issue of things that you've seen happening in the markets or happening in the financial system itself that is just brazen examples of the very few using the system to their advantage?
Oh God! Well, let's talk about MF Global. Let's talk about the bailout that took place, where the Fed just wrote checks for $16 trillion and bailed out all these banks, allowed their failed managements to stay there, didn't exact a toll on the shareholders or creditors of those institutions, and simply perpetuated the system that was already corrupt and allowed these people, allowed the banks to earn profits, non-existent profits, and allowed the managements to get these outrageous, undeserved bonuses. I mean, the list goes on and on. The abuse to individual rights, people doing things that are totally innocent, and you've seen people accidentally bring handguns into Washington, D.C. from a jurisdiction where it's legal, and they just by accident did it, and they wind up arrested, and it cost them a fortune to get out of trouble, to hire an attorney. And, the list goes on and on. As the power of the government expands, it just goes on and on. I mean, it's as long as your arm, and any place where the government intervenes, you have injustice. Any place where they're manipulating the market, where they're influencing the market, where they're causing malinvestment, like the real estate boom, all the fraud that took place, all the mortgage fraud, all the appraisal fraud, all of that stuff was brought on by easy money, by the basic allowing of Fannie and Freddie to be used as dumping grounds for valueless mortgages, and then they reissued them, securitized them, and it went on and on. And I mean, these things are just monumental, James. They just keep mushrooming and expanding, and just when you think it can't get any worse, it does. I mean, I had a cartoon up on my site, and it was really kind of amusing, but not really that funny. It said, give a man a gun, and he can rob a bank. Give a man a bank, and he can rob the world. And that's what I feel like it is.
Yeah, it would be a lot funnier if it wasn't true, I suppose. But yeah, it's a good point. Well, Kerry, if I didn't know you better, I'd say you were waking from your statist slumbers. It sounded like you were implying that government fraud and coercion is the base of all of this, and without the government regulatory systems in place, we wouldn't. No one would be able to take that accrued power and use it as the big club to beat everyone else down in the economy.
Yeah, well, government is the thumb on the butcher's scale. And, whenever the government gets involved, they pick the winners and losers rather than the market doing so. And I'm totally against virtually all the forms of regulation other than instances where the government acts to protect individual rights. It's not a perfect system. It can't be because man is involved. But the regulatory democracy just leads to undemocratic results, unfair economic results, and destruction, and it impoverishes all of us. We all are the poorer when a new drug doesn't get through the FDA that could generate profits for its manufacturer and help people, all because the FDA did like a study. And, it just goes on and on. In every aspect of society and the economy, the government's there ostensibly trying to help people, but you and I probably suspect they're there to expand their power and extract their tribute.
Unfortunately so, and you raise a good point, because all of this is so interlocked and interconnected, and it relates to regulations, for example, of the FDA regulating the health sphere, and it goes into so many different aspects of this. And something that you raised earlier, a point that you raised earlier, is that now we see the tensions rising in the Middle East, we see the tensions rising here in East Asia, possible military actions stemming over island disputes and things like this. Definitely, it seems we're moving into a period of general destabilization. Perhaps you can address how is this economic destabilization really feeding into a greater, a tension strategy of warfare that can be used to distract the public from what's happening in the economy.
Yeah, if I were a cynic, I would say that governments invariably, when economies go bad, they look for external enemies, and they want to blame it on somebody else. They never really want to get to the underlying reasons why the economy is tanking, and it's always somebody else's fault. Like, these guys work too cheap, they don't have unions, whatever, and the other guys are no different. And it's one world. It's you can't. These excuses, I think, are wearing thin to go to war, and I think we're all fed up with it. And I think, do I want my kids going off to fight some war, even if they volunteer to go? Do I want them going off to fight an unjust war, an unnecessary war? I don't even want to get into the conspiracy theories and all that. I just believe that war is a racket, and that the powers that be, the elites, clean up on it. And why do we have to engage in this for corporate welfare? It's just, in my book, I talk about how my father was in World War II, and he flew the hump, which was flying over Mount Everest, the Himalayas, from India to China. It's called the Hindu-Burma Kush because the overland supply route was blocked by the Japanese. And originally, when he started out, he was bringing cannons and war material. And then when the war was winding down, he was bringing vats of ketchup, feminine hygiene products, all sorts of different American brands. And the war became a corporatist effort to inculcate U.S. brands in India and China, hook them on our cigarettes, hook them on all of our different high-quality brands, and they were good brands. But why should my father have been risking his life to spread the American corporate way? And that's not right. If you accept everything else, the righteousness of World War II, which there's plenty of arguments to go around, that one, that they should be risking their life transporting consumer products to what were third world countries, no justification for it. And yet, the more cynical among us would argue that that was the intent of the war in the first place.
Well, war is an adjunct of economic imperialism? Why, I never. All right, we'll be right back after these messages. All right, welcome back. This is Corbett Report Radio on the Republic Broadcasting Network, and you are tuned into republicbroadcasting.org, and I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. Tonight we've been talking to Kerry Lutz of the Financial Survival Network. Once again, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, a one-stop shop for all sorts of information on the economy and finance in general. So, Kerry, just in the final few minutes here, let's tell people about the Financial Survival Toolkit and the weekly newsletter that you have and whatever other sources of information might be available for people there at your website.
Oh, sure thing. Well, the toolkit, just a number of actions you can take, a number of go-to websites and shows, of which we will have the Corbett Report on there when we update it shortly. My 50 or so go-to websites every day. Places to buy food, reputable gold and silver bullion dealers, and other precautions that you should think about taking because we are living in such uncertain times and there's so much going on. And then the newsletter, I generally write a message to the more devoted listeners who've signed up at financialsurvivalnetwork.com, talk about the week's activities. This week I was discussing precious metals market rigging, and then we've got a list of every interview we've done during the week. And, there's a lot of interesting things on there. The site, I have my webmaster, Stefan B., who is a human content aggregator. A lot of sites you go to, they use RSS feeds, and you'll get a lot of extraneous stuff in there. Stefan has, on his computer at any given time, over 100 windows open with different free-thinking websites, and he looks at the articles and thinks whether or not you'll find them interesting. And most often you do. We get tons of comments. And when people go to the site, they stay on there, James, for 11 minutes, which is like, I don't stay on many websites.
That's an eternity in web terms, absolutely. Yeah. All right, excellent. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're right up against the end of the program. But, Kerry, I know you've been busy today and you weren't prepared or organized for today's interview, but you did excellently well, and always a pleasure to talk to you. Tons of information, so I hope people will check out financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Kerry Lutz, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Hey, James, thank you. Always a pleasure. Keep up the great work. I've become a major fan of your show myself. Try to catch it as often as I can.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again in the future.
Great. Bye.
All right, there he goes, friends. Kerry Lutz, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Once again, this is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, just reminding you that my latest DVD, The Last Word, is available now for purchase from CorbettReport.com, so you can pick that up at CorbettReport.com. Details are all there, and of course, as always, all of these videos are available freely online, but your support does help to make my media possible, so thank you to all of you out there for supporting the Corbett Report.